That day, the rain wasn't heavy, but it fell just enough to make everything feel slower, heavier, more personal. In the small town of San Lazaro, the streets turned into mirrors. The rooftops dripped, and the air smelled like warm bread and wet soil. Matteo walked with his hands in his pockets, his eyes lowered, as if he were avoiding his own life. It wasn't sadness alone, it was something harder to name. It was that quiet feeling of being alive, but living in a place that didn't belong to him. Like his body was there, and his soul had stayed behind a long time ago. Matteo was 26 years old and worked in a small repair shop. Nothing fancy, a narrow space with tools hanging on the walls, boxers on the floor, and a wooden table marked by years of work. People in the neighborhood knew him well. They said good things about him. Matteo always helps. Matteo never says no. Matteo is a good man. And those words, that should have sounded like compliments. To Matteo, they sounded like a warning, because he knew what they meant underneath Matteo is easy. It all started with something simple. A friendship. One of those friendships that feels like home at the beginning. The owner of the shop was Ivan, a man a few years older than Matteo, charismatic, fast to talk, fast to promise. Ivan had a way of smiling that made you want to believe him. And Matteo needed that. Not money, not favors. He needed belonging, because Matteo had grown up with an invisible wound. The idea that if you weren't useful, you weren't important. So when Ivan hired him, treated him well, gave him a place, Matteo thought, I can't lose this. At first, everything was normal. Matteo repaired things, locks, old radios, watches, bicycles, and he went home. But little by little, the small phrases started. Small, harmless, like drops of water. Can you stay a little longer? Just today. Can you cover for me tomorrow? It'll be quick. Brother, you're the only one who can. Matteo wanted to say no, but he always thought, if I say no, they'll stop caring about me. So he said, sure, no problem on this to Jade. 1 hour, 2, 3. As if his life was on pause, and Ivan's life was the only one that mattered. One afternoon, Matteo was about to close the shop when Ivan came in, rushing, his jacket wet from the rain. Matteo, I need a big favor. Matteo felt that sentence in his stomach, because a big favor was never just a favor. Ivan stepped closer, lowered his voice, like they were partners. I have to go to the capital tomorrow. Family situation. I need you to run the shop. All day. Matteo blinked. All day tomorrow. Yes, Ivan said quickly. You know how to handle it. Matteo thought about his own plan. It was his mother's birthday, a small, simple dinner, but important. He had promised he'd be there, and for the first time, Matteo felt resistance inside him. Tomorrow. But Ivan cut him off with a smile. Brother, if you fail me now, you'll ruin everything. That phrase was like a soft knife. No yelling, no insults, just guilt, placed directly into Matteo's hands. Matteo felt that old fear rising again. If I don't do this, they'll hate me. So he said, all right, I'll handle it. Ivan patted his shoulder. I knew I could count on you. And he walked away without looking back, as if Matteo's sacrifice was normal. That night, Matteo came home late. He sat in the kitchen without turning on the lights. He only listened to the rain. And on the table, he saw a small object that was always there, an old brown notebook with worn pages. It was his. He used to write ideas for the future in it. My own workshop. Learn woodworking. Leave this town someday. But he hadn't written anything in weeks. As if he no longer had the right to dream. Matteo opened the notebook, and something tightened in his chest. The last pages were blank. Not because he had no desires, but because he was too busy holding up everyone else's world. The next morning, Matteo arrived early, opened the shop, organized the tools, took a deep breath, and told himself, it's just one day. But life rarely destroys someone in one day. Life does it through accumulation. through repetition, through silence. At midday, a nervous customer came in. "I need this today." Erg Matteo helped. Then another one came, then a frustrated man, then a crying child with a broken bicycle, and Matteo began to run. Not with his feet, with his heart. It felt like everything depended on him, and meanwhile, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Once, twice, 3 times. It was his mother. Matteo didn't answer, not because he didn't want to, but because he was trapped in that other belief. First, do your duty, then live. At 5, Ivan didn't show up. At 6, still nothing. Matteo closed the shop late, exhausted, and when he stepped outside, the rain had stopped, but the cold stayed. Matteo walked home, and on the way, he saw something that froze him. In a small cafe, warm light glowing inside, sat Ivan laughing, with 2 other people, as if the world were light, as if he hadn't left anyone carrying anything. Matteo stood still, and something strange happened inside him. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. A sharp, painful clarity. Because in that moment, Matteo understood Ivan didn't have a family emergency. Ivan had a responsibility problem, and Matteo was solving it for him. Matteo kept walking. He arrived home. His mother sat at the table with a candle lit, cold food, and tired eyes. When she saw him enter, she didn't yell. She only said, "You didn't come." Matteo froze. "I'm sorry, I had to." She lifted her hand gently. "No, don't explain. Just tell me the truth." Matteo breathed, and for the first time, the truth came out. "I was afraid to say no." The silence became heavy. His mother looked at him with quiet pain. "Son, who were you protecting? Really?" Matteo lowered his eyes. He had no answer, because the answer hurt too much. No one. Matteo was only buying acceptance. That night, Matteo couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, and life felt like a rope pulling him in 2 directions. On one side, approval; on the other, himself. And he realized he had been choosing the first 4 years. Because it was easier. Because it required no courage, only obedience. The next day, Matteo returned to the shop. Ivan appeared like nothing had happened, smiling. "Brother, thank you for yesterday. I knew you'd save me." Matteo looked at him, and something inside him was no longer the same, because he wasn't trying to be good anymore. He was trying to be real. Matteo took a breath. "Ivan, I saw you yesterday." Ivan blinked. "What?" Matteo spoke without aggression. "I saw you in the cafe. You weren't in the capital. You weren't with your family." Ivan's smile disappeared into an uncomfortable expression. "Ah, well," it was quick. "It's not a big deal." That phrase, "it's not a big deal," felt like gasoline. Because it's a sentence that slowly kills good people. It makes you doubt your own pain. Matteo took 1 step closer. "For me, it was a big deal." Ivan laughed nervously. "So what now? You're going to be dramatic?" Matteo looked at him steadily, and for the first time, he said what he never said, "I'm not staying." "Iban from Ned." "What do you mean you're not staying?" Matteo spoke calmly. "Today, I'm leaving on time. And if you need extra help, you can ask, but you don't get to demand it." Ivan's jaw tightened. "You're changing." Matteo nodded slowly. "Yes." Ivan stared at him like Matteo had betrayed him. What a disappointment. "I thought you were loyal." That word loyal. Matteo almost laughed, because he understood the trap. Loyalty, in Ivan's mouth, meant, "Don't put limits on me." Matteo breathed. "Loyalty isn't abandoning myself." Ivan stayed silent. And then he said what people always say when they lose control. "Fine. Do whatever you want." Matteo looked at him with a new calm. "That's exactly what I'm going to do." That day, Matteo worked normally. He helped customers. He repaired. He organized, but he didn't run for anyone. He didn't sacrifice himself silently. He simply did his job. And when his time came, he took off his gloves, washed his hands, and left. As he walked down the street, he felt something strange. The town was the same. The shop was the same. But his chest had space, as if he had recovered air, as if, for the first time, there was room for him. That night, Matteo opened his notebook, took a pencil, and wrote one single sentence. I stayed so I wouldn't lose them, and I lost myself. And seeing it written down made the whole twist clear. It wasn't T. Ivan who destroyed him. It was Matteo's fear of being rejected. It was the habit of saying yes to avoid conflict. It was the belief that being liked was more important than having peace. That's the truth hidden inside a simple story. People don't always hurt you with punches. Sometimes they hurt you with routine, with soft pressure, with guilt, with smiles. Until one day you become someone who lives to hold up others and forgets to hold yourself. Because leading your own life doesn't look like shouting. It doesn't look like fighting. Sometimes it looks like something much harder. Choosing what matters. Even if someone gets upset, deciding with clarity. Even without applause. Protecting your energy, even if they call you selfish. And understanding that your worth isn't measured by how many times you say yes. It's measured by whether you still exist at the end of the day. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and tell me in the comments, who have you been afraid to lose? While losing yourself, sometimes peace begins when you stop staying where you're not protected. Sometimes peace begins when you choose yourself.